Well, good morning, and I hope you had a good weekend. Over the weekend at Salway, we looked at Hebrews 11 and the next part of the story, Hebrews 11, verse 20 to 22, which compresses the lives of three of the Old Testament heroes into just 3 lines. So if you go back to Genesis, where it's drawn from, if you read from 25 to 50, you'll get a lot more information than Hebrews provides. So I just wanted to think today a little bit about Isaac and a bit more about Isaac tomorrow, because you don't read much generally about Isaac. He's lumped with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but there's a lot less about him. But I think what we learn about him is quite instructive if you go back to Genesis. So in Genesis 25 and 26 and 27, that's where you encounter more about Isaac. And he received the same promises as his father Abraham. That's what it tells us in Hebrews 11. But you'll see in Genesis 26 that the Lord repeats those promises that he gave to Abraham. He gives them to Isaac as a sign that he's part of the same spiritual line. Interestingly, he tells Isaac not to go down to Egypt. Now you have to go um, further back in Genesis to Genesis 13 to see Abraham making that mistake in a time of famine. He has been to Egypt and there gets himself into a bit of a state with the Egyptians. You can read about that. Actually, it's in Genesis, end of Genesis 12. Um, uh, Rather, God tells Isaac not to go down, but he will bless him. He will bless him where he is. And you read Genesis 26, you see that's what happens. Uh, Isaac plants crops and reaps 100-fold, which is a sign of enormous blessing. And he does become immensely rich. Interestingly, he makes the same mistakes as his dad. You'll see in that same chapter, telling his wife Rebecca not to say that he is that they are married, and he's afraid of what the Philistine locals will do to him. You can read about that in that chapter. It's interesting. I think that chapter 26 revolves around the opposition that Isaac feels he's facing, and he does face. It's not serious attacks, just low-level harassment, because he becomes immensely wealthy, and the Philistines therefore become jealous of him. And so in the end, they send him away. He's too large for them. They can't cope with him. But they fill up the wells, the wells of water that his father Abraham had dug. You'd think that's a bit crazy, actually. If there's a well, people are going to need water. Why would you fill it up? Well, it's to get rid of Isaac, and they prevent him from settling, so he has to move away. He digs more. The locals quarrel with him, and he moves on. It's only when he digs a third well that he finds space. That's what he calls it, Rehoboth, meaning room. And God promises to bless him. And then the locals come and make a peace treaty with him. And then a fourth well is discovered, and a whole town is named after it, Beersheba. So there's great blessing in the face of certain irritations. And it struck me that there's a lesson here for us as Christians in the world, that we have to maintain faith in the face of, what should we say, unsympathetic world around us, an ungodly world. As I said, Isaac was not attacked. He wasn't persecuted. Or rather, God blessed him. He became immensely wealthy. But a whole phase of his life was dominated by the struggles for water and struggles with unscrupulous people. Um, so they've sent him away out of envy, even filling up the wells that were there. He digs more, and the locals quarrel with him. They argue that it's their water, probably thinking it because it's their land and he was a nomad. So he moves on. He digs another, and they argue again, and he moves on, graciously backing down twice. Well, that's what you call turning the other cheek, isn't it? Do you think they thanked him for it? No, I doubt it. They probably assumed this is our land, you can't have our water. Do you think they were moved by his gracious generosity in moving away? I doubt that either. Isaac's struggles show that we live in a world that is unsympathetic to the faith that we hold and the way in which we're called to live it out. And the danger is we feel we're going to lose out if we put those principles into operation that we see in the Sermon on the Mount, for instance. Isaac's already putting them into practice 2,000 years beforehand. The people around us, they might not hate us, they probably don't, um, but they may exploit us, or they may be completely unsympathetic to us in times of crisis like that. And we need the faith that Jesus gives us, that if we put him first, he will give us all that we need. Isaac exemplifies that. And secondly, I think one thing that comes out is just a picture that comes to me from Genesis 26, where you have the picture of him reopening the wells that his father had dug. He went back to the places where his father had been blessed to find the water that would allow him to prosper. I like that as a picture of trying to find, digging for sources of spiritual strength. You have to dig a bit. We sometimes talk about digging into the word. We sometimes talk about praying hard or persevering in prayer. We sometimes perhaps even talk about using the stuff from previous generations, the things that were written 100 years ago to help you. J.C. Ryle, for instance, is quite popular at the moment, and he was a Victorian sort of preacher, and yet his material will really help. So we have to dig for these things that will enable us to persevere and enable us to stand firm in the world, believing that God's blessing will come and that he will help us and guard us and provide for us. So just a short couple of lessons from Isaac. We've got a couple more tomorrow, actually, because today's, if you like, were troubles without. Tomorrow we'll think about troubles within. Okay, and I'll see you tomorrow.